Have you ever wondered what happens to the loyal horses that spend decades pulling Amish buggies and plowing fields when they can no longer work? These gentle giants give their entire lives in service, working from sunrise to sunset, year after year. But when age, injury, or exhaustion catches up with them, their fate takes a surprising turn. Some find peaceful retirement, while others face a much darker reality that the Amish community rarely talks about publicly. The truth might shock you, and it's far more complicated than you think. Today, we're uncovering what really happens to old Amish horses when their working days are over. Welcome to Amish Forge, where we dive deep into the fascinating and often misunderstood world of the Amish community. In the modern world of cars and tractors, the Amish still rely on horsepower. Literally, these hard-working animals are the backbone of Amish life, pulling buggies through all seasons, plowing fields, and hauling heavy loads day in and day out. But horses, like humans, age, they get tired, injured, and eventually can't perform the demanding work anymore. So what happens next? Do they retire peacefully in green pastures? Are they sold to loving families? Or is there a harsher reality? Behind closed barn doors, in this video, we're exploring every option, the controversy, and the changing attitudes within Amish communities about their retired horses. The working life of Amish horses in the Amish community. Horses are not pets or companions in the traditional sense. They are essential workers, vital tools for daily survival. From the moment an Amish horse is trained, usually around 2 to 3 years old, it begins a life of rigorous labor that will continue for the next 15 to 20 years. These horses wake up before dawn, just like their Amish owners, ready to fulfill their duties. The most common breeds used are standard breds, Belgian draft horses, and sometimes Percherons, chosen specifically for their strength, endurance, and calm temperament. A typical workday for an Amish horse involves pulling buggies along roads for transportation, sometimes covering 20 to 30 miles in a single day. They also plow fields during planting and harvest seasons, haul heavy wagons loaded with produce, lumber, or supplies, and perform various farm tasks that require raw power. Unlike modern machinery that can be turned off, these horses work in all weather conditions: scorching summer heat, freezing, winter cold, rain, and snow. The Amish view this work as a mutual relationship. They provide food, shelter, and care, while the horse provides labor. Training is thorough and begins early, teaching young horses to respond to voice commands, handle traffic, and remain calm in stressful situations. The bond between an Amish family and their horse can be strong, but it is fundamentally built on utility and necessity rather than emotional attachment. Children grow up learning to harness, drive, and care for horses, understanding that these animals are central to their way of life. However, this demanding lifestyle takes a serious toll, and not every horse can sustain decades of such intense physical labor without consequences. The physical toll of constant, demanding work leave lasting marks on Amish horses, both visible and hidden beneath their coats. By the time a horse reaches 15 to 20 years of age, the cumulative strain begins to show in ways that can no longer be ignored. Joint problems are among the most common issues, particularly arthritis in the knees, hocks, and fetlocks. Caused by years of pulling heavy loads on hard surfaces, tendons and ligaments become weakened and prone to injury, leading to chronic lameness that makes even basic movement painful. The repetitive stress of pulling buggies and plows also affects their hooves, which can develop cracks, abscesses, and laminitis if not meticulously maintained. Back problems are another frequent concern, as the constant pressure from harnesses and the weight of loads can cause muscle strain and spinal issues. Respiratory problems can develop from working in dusty fields or cold weather without adequate rest. Unlike pleasure horses that might work a few hours a day, Amish horses often labor for 8 to 10 hours daily, sometimes even longer during critical farming periods. This relentless schedule leaves little time for their bodies to recover. Additionally, roadwork trotting on pavement while pulling buggies is particularly hard on their legs and joints, accelerating wear and tear. Some horses develop behavioral changes due to chronic pain, becoming resistant to work, anxious, or difficult to handle. Veterinary care in Amish communities varies widely. While some families invest in regular checkups and treatments, others take a more minimal approach, addressing only the most serious issues. When a horse begins to show significant signs of declines, stumbling frequently, refusing to pull, or showing obvious panda family faces, a difficult decision. The horse is given years of faithful service, but keeping an animal that cannot work presents both practical and financial challenges for a community built on self-sufficiency and frugality. Amish. Religious beliefs about animals. Understanding. What happens to retired Amish? Horses requires understanding the religious and philosophical framework that shapes Amish thinking about animals. The Amish interpret the Bible, particularly the Book of Genesis, as establishing a clear hierarchy. Humans have dominion over animals, which were created by God to serve human needs. This is not a cruel or dismissive view, but rather one rooted in stewardship, the belief that humans are responsible caretakers of God's creation, but that animals exist primarily for practical purposes. In Amish theology, animals do not possess souls in the same way humans do, and therefore the moral obligations toward them are different. This perspective shapes how they treat working animals throughout their lives, and especially at the end of their usefulness. The concept of sentimentality toward animals is generally discouraged in traditional Amish culture, while kindness and proper care are expected after all. A well-treated animal works better, and longer. Forming deep emotional bonds is seen as potentially problematic, a distraction from human relationships and spiritual focus. This practical mindset means that decisions about retired horses are often made through an economic and utilitarian lens rather than an emotional one. However, it's crucial to understand that practical does not mean cruel. Many Amish families do develop affection for their horses and make considerable efforts to ensure they're treated humanely. The difference lies in how decisions are prioritized when practicality conflicts with sentiment. Across different Amish communities, there's significant variation in these attitudes. More progressive groups, particularly those with greater exposure to outside perspectives, have begun reconsidering traditional views, influenced partly by younger generations and partly by external criticism. Some Amish now openly discuss animal welfare in ways their grandparents never did. But in the most conservative settlements, the traditional view remains firmly in place. A horse is livestock, a tool that serves a purpose, and when that purpose ends, practical decisions must be made without excessive emotional consideration. When retirement arrives, the moment when an Amish family realizes their horse can no longer work is rarely sudden. It's usually a gradual recognition that accumulates over months or even years. Perhaps the horse that once eagerly pulled the buggy now hesitates, showing reluctance or pain. Maybe it stumbles more frequently on familiar roads or takes longer to recover after a day's work. The decision-making process that follows is complex, influenced by multiple factors that vary from family to family. Financial considerations play a significant role. Keeping a non-working horse means continued expenses for feed, shelter, and any necessary medical care, without the benefit of the labor that previously justified those costs. For a community that values self-sufficiency and careful resource management, this economic reality cannot be ignored. A retired horse might consume $50 to $80 worth of hay per month, plus additional costs for grain, hoof care, and veterinary needs. For large families living on modest farm incomes, this represents a genuine burden. Family circumstances also matter greatly. A family with extra pasture land, fewer financial pressures, and perhaps a sentimental attachment to a particular horse might choose to keep it. Children who grew up with that horse might advocate strongly for its retirement on the farm. Conversely, families struggling financially or with limited land have fewer options. Community expectations and norms influence these decisions as well. In some settlements, keeping retired horses is common and respected. In others, it's viewed as impractical or even wasteful. The specific horse's history plays a role. A horse that served faithfully for 20 years might receive more consideration than one that was difficult or less reliable. Some families begin planning for retirement early, perhaps reducing the horse's workload gradually or finding lighter tasks it can still manage. Others face the decision suddenly when injury or illness forces their hand, regardless of the circumstances. Most Amish families genuinely wrestle with this choice, balancing their practical needs against their sense of responsibility toward an animal that has served them well. Option 1. Keeping them for some Amish families, the most honorable path is allowing their retired horse to live out its remaining years peacefully on the farm. This option represents the ideal outcome many outsiders hope for, and it does happen more frequently than some might assume, particularly in families with the means and space to support it. A retired horse on an Amish farm typically moves to a pasture where it can graze freely, no longer burdened by harnesses or daily labor. These horses often form companionship bonds with other retired animals or younger horses not yet in full work. The transition from constant work to leisure can be striking. Horses that once seemed worn and tired often regain vitality when the pressure of daily labor is removed. Their coats improve, their weight stabilizes, and their personalities sometimes shine in new ways. For the families who choose this path, the decision often reflects both practical and personal factors. Some view it as the right thing to do, a reward for years of faithful service and a demonstration of good stewardship. Children who grew up with the horse often become its advocates, pleading with parents to let it stay. However, this choice requires resources that not all families possess. Adequate pasture land is essential. A horse needs at least 1 to 2 acres to graze properly. Winter feeding becomes more expensive when the horse isn't working to earn its keep, requiring regular hay and possibly grain supplements, hoof trimming every 6 to 8 weeks, occasional veterinary care, and shelter from extreme weather. All add to the ongoing costs. Some families can afford this more easily than others. Those with larger farms, diversified income sources, or fewer children to support might keep multiple retired horses. In certain progressive Amish communities, this practice has become more common as attitudes shift and younger generations push for better animal welfare standards. These families often take quiet pride in their retired horses, seeing them as living testaments to responsible animal care and moral duty. Loud noises, unpredictable situations, and constant human interaction, making them potentially excellent trail horses, therapy animals, or companions for novice riders. They're typically well-mannered, accustomed to being handled, and less prone to spooking than horses raised in quieter environments. Price ranges vary considerably based on the horse's age, health, and remaining capabilities. A younger, retired horse, perhaps only 10 to 12 years old, with plenty of life left, might sell for anywhere from $500 to $2,000. Older horses with more limitations might go for just a few $100s, essentially knowledge or resources to properly care for a horse, leading to neglect. Others may purchase with good intentions but face unexpected financial difficulties. Option 3. The auction system. When Amish families cannot keep their retired horses and don't find private buyers, many turn to livestock auctions, a deeply ingrained part of agricultural commerce in Amish regions. These auctions occur weekly or monthly in rural areas across Pennsylvania, Ohio, Indiana, and other states. For these auctions, kill buyers. These individuals purchase horses specifically to sell for slaughter, typically shipping them to facilities in Canada or Mexico, where horse meat is processed for human consumption in other countries, or for pet food. Kill buyers where kill buyers purchase horses at rock-bottom prices based on their weight. These horses are then transported, often in crowded trailers over long distances, to slaughterhouses in Canada or Mexico, countries where horse slaughter remains legal and operates as a commercial industry. The meat is then exported to countries where horse consumption is culturally accepted, including parts of Europe, Asia, and South America, or processed into pet food. The economic reality driving this grim trade is straightforward and brutal. A horse that might be worthless as a riding animal still has value as meat. A 1,000-pound horse can be purchased at auction for perhaps $300 to $500 and sold to a slaughterhouse for slightly more, providing a profit margin for the kill buyer. For Amish families selling at auction, the horse might fetch $100 to $300, far less than the cost of euthanasia by a veterinarian, which typically runs $200 to $500, plus the additional expense of body disposal. This economic calculus, combined with the cultural perspective that views horses as livestock rather than companions, makes slaughter a practical option for some. The slaughter process itself is industrial and impersonal, designed for efficiency, rather than individual animal welfare. Critics point out numerous welfare concerns throughout this pipeline: horses stressed by transport, inadequate regulations, and slaughter methods that don't always ensure quick deaths. Former Amish horses, accustomed to human interaction and generally trusting of people, may be particularly vulnerable in these frightening final circumstances. Why does this happen? Beyond economics, the answer lies partly in the lack of alternatives. Euthanasia and proper disposal require upfront costs that some families genuinely cannot afford. Horse rescue organizations are overwhelmed and cannot possibly take every retired Amish horse. And, within the traditional Amish value system, spending significant money to end an animal's life humanely. When a market alternative exists, doesn't always make practical sense. This reality generates fierce debate, both outside and increasingly within Amish communities. Responses: the issue of retired horse treatment has sparked conversations within Amish communities that reveal generational divides, regional differences, and evolving perspectives on animal welfare. These internal debates are often invisible to outsiders, but represent significant cultural tension. Older, more traditional Amish members tend to defend established practices, pointing out that horses are livestock, that the community has always handled animals this way, and that outsiders don't understand their values or economic realities. They argue that they treat their horses well during their working years, providing food, shelter, and care, and that what happens after the horse can no longer work is a practical matter, not a moral failing. They sometimes express frustration that English critics, who eat beef and chicken without concern, suddenly become outraged about horse slaughter, seeing this as hypocritical. However, younger Amish individuals, particularly those with more exposure to outside perspectives through businesses or social interactions, increasingly question these traditional approaches. Some have been influenced by animal welfare arguments, recognizing that perhaps there are better ways to handle retirement that still respect Amish values. These younger voices don't necessarily advocate for treating horses like pets, but they do push for more humane end-of-life options and greater consideration for animals that have served faithfully. Within some communities, informal standards have emerged. Certain church districts have begun discouraging auction sales to unknown buyers, encouraging members to either keep horses, find verified good homes, or use veterinary euthanasia if necessary. Some Amish individuals have even started small-scale retirement operations on their own farms, taking in horses from neighbors who cannot keep them. These initiatives remain quiet and localized, but represent meaningful shifts. The criticism from outside the community has also prompted defensive responses. Some Amish feel unfairly targeted, pointing out that many horse owners across all cultures make difficult decisions about aging animals, and that industrial agriculture practices affecting cattle, pigs, and chickens raise similar welfare questions that receive less attention. They argue that singling out the Amish reflects prejudice against their lifestyle rather than genuine concern for horses. Yet simultaneously, the sustained attention has made some Amish families more thoughtful about their choices, recognizing that their animal handling practices affect public perception of their entire community. This creates pressure toward change. Even if that change happens slowly and varies greatly between settlements, rescue organizations and activists in response to the fate of many retired Amish horses. A network of rescue organizations and individual activists has emerged, dedicated to intercepting these animals before they reach slaughter and finding them safe retirement homes. These groups operate throughout Amish regions, often working tirelessly with limited funding and resources. Organizations like Remember Me Rescue, New Vocations, and numerous smaller regional groups specifically focus on saving horses from auction kill pens. Their approach typically involves attending livestock auctions, identifying horses likely purchased by kill buyers, and outbidding them or negotiating purchases after the auction. This work requires significant financial resources. Rescues might spend several $100s per horse, then face additional costs for veterinary care, feed, and boarding while seeking adoptive homes. Some rescue operations are impressively organized with networks of foster farms, adoption screening processes, and rehabilitation programs that prepare horses for new lives. They assess each horse's physical and mental condition, provide necessary medical treatment, or injured and exhausted have transformed into healthy, happy animals, living peaceful lives with families who cherish them. Social media has amplified these efforts dramatically. Rescue organizations post photos and videos of saved horses, their transformations, and urgent calls when horses are in immediate danger. These posts generate donations. Visibility has pressured some auction houses to be more careful about obvious kill buyers and has made some Amish sellers more aware that their actions might be documented and criticized publicly. However, the rescue community faces enormous challenges. The number of Amish horses needing help far exceeds available resources. Rescue organizations operate on tight budgets, relying on donations and volunteer labor. Burnout among rescuers is common. The emotional toll of seeing suffering animals, combined with constant financial stress and the knowledge that they cannot save everyone, weighs heavily. Some activists have been accused of being too aggressive or judgmental toward Amish sellers, Amish families, and auction regulars, creating trust that enables better outcomes over time. Regional and community differences, understanding what happens to retired Amish horses requires recognizing that the Amish are not a monolithic group. Significant variations exist between regions, church districts, and individual families. These differences dramatically affect how retired horses are treated, creating a spectrum of practices from exemplary to concerning. In Pennsylvania, county Amish, who face more tourism and outside scrutiny, have generally become more conscious of animal welfare concerns. Many families there now keep retired horses or carefully screen buyers. However, in more isolated Pennsylvania communities, traditional practices remain common, including regular come from plain communities. Ohio presents a different picture. Communities like Geauga County have reputations for more progressive animal treatment, partly influenced by younger generation members who advocate for change. Some Ohio settlements have informal community agreements, discouraging auction sales to unknown buyers. Conversely, other Ohio districts maintain very traditional approaches, viewing horses strictly as farm equipment. Indiana Amish entire community's behavior, while one who maintains strict traditional views reinforces older practices. Settlement age also matters. Newer, smaller communities often retain more conservative practices, while older, more established areas have had more time to evolve and respond to external pressures. Schwarzentruber Amish, among the most conservative groups, typically maintain the strictest utilitarian approach to animals, with little concern for outside opinions. They represent one end of the spectrum, viewing horses purely as tools and making decisions based entirely on practical considerations. At the other end are more progressive groups, like New Order Amish or Beachy Amish, who have adopted some modern conveniences and are generally more receptive to animal welfare arguments. Individual farmer choices matter too. Even within the same community, different families make different decisions based on personal values, financial situations, and experiences. The changing landscape. The future of retired Amish horse treatment appears to be slowly shifting, driven by multiple converging forces that are creating gradual but meaningful change. Modern awareness and communication technology have played surprisingly significant roles, despite the Amish community's limited technology use. Even though most Amish don't personally use social media, they're aware of it through business interactions. Community members who've left, and feedback from English neighbors, they know that animal welfare issues can generate intense public attention and potentially affect their businesses or community reputation. This awareness alone has made some families more thoughtful about their choices. Younger Amish generations represent another force for change. Those born in the 1990s and later have grown up in a world where animal welfare consciousness is mainstream, even if they're not directly exposed to it, through work interactions, business dealings, or simple proximity to non-Amish people. These younger individuals have absorbed different perspectives. Some question whether traditional practices truly align with their religious values of stewardship and compassion. While they may not openly challenge elders or church authority, their personal choices as they establish their own farms often reflect more animal-conscious approaches. Economic factors also influence the changing landscape. As some Amish businesses prosper and families achieve greater financial stability, the economic pressure to auction horses diminishes. Families who can more easily absorb the cost of keeping retired horses are doing so not necessarily from sentiment, but simply because they can afford it. Additionally, the growing market for gentle, traffic-safe horses among English buyers creates financial incentives to sell directly rather than through auctions, resulting in better outcomes for many horses. Rescue organizations have become more sophisticated and better funded, able to save more horses and create more visible success stories. Their work pressures the auction system by removing horses from the slaughter pipeline and demonstrates viable alternatives. Some rescues have even developed relationships with individual Amish families, offering to take horses directly rather than having them go to auction, creating trusted pathways for better outcomes. However, predicting the pace of change is difficult. The Amish community's fundamental values and separation from mainstream culture mean that external pressure can sometimes create resistance rather than cooperation. Change typically happens gradually within Amish communities through internal discussion and consensus rather than external demands. The issue remains complex, involving economics, theology, tradition, and practical farming realities that won't be resolved quickly or universally across all Amish settlements. So there you have it, the complex reality of what happens to retired Amish horses. It's not simple, and opinions vary widely. If you found this eye-opening, smash that like button and subscribe to Amish Forge for more deep dives into this fascinating culture. Drop a comment sharing your thoughts. Should more be done to protect these hardworking animals? Share this video to spread awareness. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.